All right, this is Greg Dooley of MVictors.com, and this is the MVictors History Show. Today, we're going to talk a little more about the Little Brown Jug tradition, one of my favorites. And if you want more, go to MVictors.com and click on the jug at the menu at the top. And you've got all my writings and research over the last 10 plus years on this topic there. Okay, so today I want to get into probably one of the most important parts of the tradition, which is the fact that Michigan, after they left the jug in Minnesota, found out that they left it and wrote to Minnesota or wired them or something and said, hey, give us our jug back. And Minnesota, as far as the tale goes, famously told Michigan, you'll have to win it back. And thus, the teams play for this jug. All right, so I want to get into why the Michigan wanted it back and was told to win it back, in 1903. Why that probably isn't actually what happened. I want to get into that. So just to quickly recap, Michigan and Minnesota play a huge game in 1903. Before the game, allegedly because he feared Minnesota would taint or poison the water, Yost had his equipment manager, a guy named Tommy Roberts, go out and buy a 30-cent stoneware jug. They filled it with water. They played the game. Michigan left the jug behind. Minnesota found it a couple days later and kind of kept it as a trophy. And sometime after the game, the story goes, is just that Yost found out about it, or someone at Michigan found out about it, wrote Minnesota, contacted Minnesota one way or the other and said, we want it back, and was told, nope, you got to win it. Okay. So here are a few problems with that, right? So first of all, there's a complete lack of any evidence of correspondence or even Yost, telling people that's kind of how it went down. Lack of evidence doesn't mean it didn't happen, but Yost is a guy who really never shut up, and we have boxes and boxes and boxes of his correspondence. Minnesota has a pretty very tightly kept records. No one really has any evidence that such a message took place. Okay. Number two, the jug cost around 30 cents, right? It was either a quarter or 30 cents at the time. Okay. That's 1903. We could play these games with how much, 30 cents is worth today. But consider that tickets to the football games were about $2, sometimes even $3 for the big games. And Michigan's profit from the Minnesota game, their share of the ticket revenue was $13,000. So in jug terms, that would buy over 40,000 replacement jugs, right? So this is like Coach Harbaugh calling Minnesota because Michigan left one of their Gatorade jugs behind, right? If you want to liken it to that. So you kind of gets into why would he do that, but we'll talk about that. So maybe Yost was petty. Maybe he had heard that Minnesota had kept it as a trophy and didn't like that. Maybe he was mad because the 6-6 tie that Michigan and Minnesota played that year was the first time that he left the field without a win. And it was a brutal game, and it seems to have ended either before the clock ended or at least very abruptly. Maybe he was bitter about the whole thing, right? But it does make you ask, if he contacted Minnesota to have the jug back, how is he expecting them to return it, right? On a train? Were they going to ship it back? Was he going to pick it up the next time a Michigan team played a game in Minnesota? So that end of it is a little strange. But again, none of that really says that this didn't happen or couldn't have happened. The other part, though, is that the other side of that story is that back in 1903, Minnesota said Michigan would have to win it back, right? And the first thing you have to assume there is that Minnesota would be so bold as to find this piece of Michigan's property, which it was, right? The jug, no one disputes that. Even though Michigan left it there, right? Claimed it as its own, and then said, hey, you want it back? Well, you're going to have to win it back, and really defines the terms in which Michigan can have its own property back, right? and perhaps they did it in fun, or perhaps Minnesota, was just bitter about the 6-6 tie as well, and was making sport of old Yost for asking for his jug back. Okay, but the glaring thing is, when you look at this, is the fact is Michigan did leave the jug there. They didn't leave it in haste. They just left it in the locker room. So why would Yost really want it back in the first place? Okay. The other thing is with the win it back is there was no game on this schedule. For 1904 or beyond. Now, it can be assumed that Michigan and Minnesota, they were in the Western Conference, would eventually play again. But for Minnesota to say win it back with no game on the schedule does seem a little weird. And it could be very likely that the next game would be in Ann Arbor anyway. So was Minnesota planning to make Michigan win it back when they played in Ann Arbor? Okay. A lot of these things don't add up when you look at all of them. And it kind of makes the whole thing far-fetched. But again, I don't think any of that is direct evidence that this didn't happen. That Michigan, for whatever reason, said they wanted the jug back, and Minnesota in 1903 said, "Okay, win it back." But here's the problem: we actually have evidence to the contrary of how the whole thing started, and it didn't start, according to written accounts, in 1903. It actually started in 1909. Okay, we have accounts from Minnesota's athletic director, the man who originally kept the jug in his office for 5 years, from his personal memoirs, that the whole notion of playing the jug was crafted in a couple conversations with his captain and maybe with Yost, but primarily with his captain, Minnesota's captain, that is, right before the 1909 game. He pulled it down. He said this might be fun. It had Michigan Jug written on it because that's how they painted it. And it said, well, it'd be fun if we played for it. Oscar Munson, the guy who found the jug originally in 1903, the custodian or equipment manager for Minnesota, in his memoirs said Yost didn't know anything about the jug when he returned in 1909. In fact, he saw it hanging in Doc Cook's office the day before the game and asked him, "What's that?" And he explained, and at some point says, "Hey, they decided to play for it." Right? Even Tommy Roberts, who actually helped dispel some of the myths about how the jug came to be in the first place, right? He wrote on the 50th anniversary of the 6-6 tie that it was Minnesota who actually wrote to Michigan just saying, "We have your little brown jug, come and win it." So, as a side question, how did we come up with this win it back story? I think it is generated from Tommy Roberts' his personal tale of his recollection of the jug, but all of these accounts talk about this happening before the 1909 game, which make a ton of more sense. All right. So again, is it impossible that this happened after the 1903 game and Yost wanted the jug back? The jug he left, by the way, he suddenly wanted it back. There's all kinds of crazy early stories. Michigan left in a hurry because you kind of have to explain why they would want it back, right? It was a lucky jug. Other stories go into that Michigan actually had the jug before the game and they had the scores of their other games on it, they're all not true. And I think all of these early stories were an effort to kind of drum up the fun and the meaning behind a rivalry, which, when it comes down to it, was really about a water jug that was bought before a big game, was left after the game, and that a couple guys came together and said it'd be fun to play for it the next time they played. That's really what happened, right? Now, when people are asked questions about it, they like to make up stories, but that's really where it comes from. I hope you enjoyed this. If you want more, subscribe on YouTube, check out MVictors.com, and for the MVictors History Show, this is Greg Dooley.